I thought my grandson's high school graduation party would be the proudest night of my life. But at the country club my son-in-law had rented out, every guest got prime rib and champagne toast except me. My daughter's husband handed me a paper plate of crackers and said, "Frank, at your age, rich food just sits wrong. We're doing you a favor." My daughter didn't say a word. I picked up a cracker, smiled, and said, "Careful, that's the last favor you'll ever do me." They laughed. 6 weeks later, none of them were laughing. I'm glad you're here with me tonight. Before we get going, tell me down in the comments where's home for you, what town, what state. I always like knowing who's sitting with me. This is a story about family, about money, about the difference between being generous and being invisible. Some names and details have been changed, but the truth underneath them is mine. There are 3 nights I could point to and say, that's when everything in my life turned a corner. The first was the night I asked Diane to marry me, down on one knee in the parking lot of a bowling alley, because I couldn't wait until we got somewhere nicer, and she said yes before I even finished the sentence. The second was the night I signed the papers turning Whitfield Roofing over to my nephew. 41 years of ladders and shingles and Saturday emergency calls folded into a retirement check that still didn't feel like it belonged to me. The third was the night my son-in-law handed me a plate of crackers at my own grandson's graduation party and told me rich food wasn't for a man my age. That night was the second Saturday in June, and Greg had booked the back room at Silvercrest Country Club, the one with the tall windows looking out over the ninth green. White linens, low candles, a little string quartet that Greg had hired because he said Tyler only graduates high school once. Tyler was my grandson, 18 years old, headed to state in the fall to study engineering, and I had never in my life been prouder of anything that wasn't my own children. The whole family was there. My daughter Kelly sat beside her husband Greg, and across from them sat Greg's parents, Doug and Pam Whitaker, who I'd met maybe 6 times in 10 years and who always looked at me the way people look at a stain on a nice couch, not hostile, just faintly, permanently disappointed. Tyler sat between his mother and his little sister Ava, who was 12 and spent most of dinner drawing on the paper tablecloth with a pen she'd smuggled out of her purse. The food came out the way food comes out at a place like that, in a slow, proud procession. Doug got the prime rib, a slab of meat the size of a hardcover book, blood red in the center the way he liked it. Pam got the same. Kelly ordered the seared scallops, 6 of them arranged on the plate like they were posing for a photograph. Greg got a whiskey-glazed filet and a second whiskey to go with it. Tyler got a burger the size of his own head because even on his big night, he was still 17. No, 18 now at heart. Ava got chicken tenders and didn't look up from her drawing. Then the parade stopped. Nothing came for me. I sat there with my hands folded on the white tablecloth, looking at the space in front of me where a plate should have been. The waiter passed right by. Conversation kept rolling along without so much as a hitch. Doug was telling some story about a fishing trip in Michigan, and Pam was nodding along with that particular attentiveness wives give husbands when they want the whole table to notice how attentive they're being. I waited a minute, then I asked, quiet enough, not to make a scene, "Kelly, honey, did they skip my order?" Kelly didn't look up from her scallops. She glanced sideways at Greg instead, the way she'd been doing since she was 16 and needed permission for something. Greg set down his whiskey. "We didn't skip anything, Frank," he said. Kelly and I talked about it beforehand. He said it like he was announcing a business decision, calm and reasonable, the tone of a man who'd rehearsed it in the car. "You've had that stent put in, all that rich food, the butter, the fat, it's not doing your heart any favors. We're looking out for you." He waved the waiter over, and a moment later a small plate landed in front of me. A stack of water crackers, a little ramekin of hummus, nothing else. I looked at my daughter. "Kelly?" She finally met my eyes, and there was something apologetic in her face, but not enough to move her mouth. "Dad, he's not wrong. Dr. Ellis did say to watch your sodium." I thought about pointing out that hummus has plenty of sodium too, that this had nothing to do with my heart and everything to do with something else, something I couldn't name yet but could feel sitting in the room like a change in air pressure. Instead, I picked up a cracker and held it between 2 fingers. My chest went tight, but it wasn't anger. Not yet. It was something colder and older than anger. I looked down the table at Tyler, who had stopped chewing his burger halfway through and was watching me with the particular stillness of a kid who understands something is wrong but doesn't yet have the words to name it. He was 18 years old and looked, in that moment, exactly like he had at 6, sitting on my lap in the cab of my work truck, both hands on the wheel, pretending to drive. Grandpa, Tyler said quietly, you can have some of my burger. I squeezed his shoulder. I'm all right, bud. You enjoy your night. Greg was already flagging the waiter down for another whiskey, laughing at something Doug had said. I looked at the cracker in my hand, then set it down on the little plate, and I said one word into the space of the table. Not loud. Not sharp. Noted. Kelly's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Something flickered across her face, half a second of doubt, and then it smoothed over, and she turned back to her mother-in-law and picked up a conversation about kitchen renovations like nothing at all had happened. I ate my crackers. I drank my water. I listened to Doug talk about the fish that got away on the Au Sable River, a fish that seemed to grow 6 inches every time he told the story. I watched Greg refill Pam's wine before he refilled his own wife's. And I paid attention the way I'd paid attention on every job site for 41 years, quietly, missing nothing. Because a man who spent his life reading blueprints learns to read a room the same way. When dessert came around, a tower of chocolate cake with a sparkler stuck in the top for Tyler, nobody asked if I wanted a slice. I didn't need one. The check came folded in a leather booklet, and Doug reached for it out of habit, glanced at the total, and slid it down the table to Greg without a word. The kind of pass two men do when they've split checks 100 times before and know exactly whose turn it is. Greg took it, slid his card in, handed it back to the waiter, before I could even reach for my wallet. I've got this one, Frank, he said to the table, straightening his jacket like a man accepting an award. Don't even think about it. I thought about pointing out that nobody had offered me the check to begin with. I thought about a lot of things. Instead, I helped Ava find the cap to her pen, told Doug it was good seeing him, and kissed my daughter on the cheek the way I always did, because 40-some years of habit doesn't break in one evening, even when you're standing in the wreckage of a new understanding. Out in the parking lot, the June air was warm and thick with the smell of cut grass from the golf course. I unlocked my truck, the old Silverado, the one with the rusted wheel well I keep meaning to take care of, and sat behind the wheel without turning the key. Through the tall windows of the club, I could see them all still sitting there, candlelight on their faces, Doug laughing at something, Kelly's hand resting on Greg's arm. They looked complete, framed, and I was already gone, and nothing about the picture had changed at all. I drove home with the windows down even though it wasn't quite warm enough for that, letting the June night fill up the cab. Somewhere around Route 9, I stopped thinking about the crackers and started thinking about a manila folder in the bottom drawer of my desk, one I hadn't opened in almost 5 years. Papers from when I sold the business, numbers only my accountant and my lawyer had ever laid eyes on. I parked in my driveway and sat there a minute, looking up at my own dark house. I'll remember this, I said to nobody. Then I went inside. Diane used to say I ran on rooster time. Up at 5:30 every morning, no alarm clock needed, feet on the floor before the birds had made up their minds about the day. She'd groan and pull the blanket over her head when she heard me in the kitchen, and I'd bring her coffee in bed by 6 as a peace offering, and she'd sit up, take the mug in both hands, and say, Frank Whitfield, you are a menace, and mean it, as the highest compliment a woman ever paid a man. She's been gone 4 years now. I still wake at 5:30. I still have the coffee made by 6. There's just nobody left to call me a menace over it. The morning after the graduation party was one of those mornings the quiet sits a little heavier than usual. I sat at my kitchen table with my mug, looking out at the maple tree Diane planted the spring, Kelly turned 2, and I thought about crackers, and hummus, and the particular tone Greg had used, like he was doing me a kindness. Something about it kept snagging in my mind the way a splinter does before you even know it's there. 2 days later, my knee started acting up, the same knee I'd had scoped 15 years back, the one that always let me know before a storm rolled in, and I drove myself to the pharmacy on Ridgeline Avenue to pick up a refill on my anti-inflammatories. The girl behind the counter, a young woman named Priya who'd been ringing me up for going on 3 years, pulled up my account and frowned at the screen. Mr. Whitfield, I'm showing your insurance declined this. Says the deductible's already been met for the year, and there's a note here about a secondary card on file being used for a large purchase last month. You want me to run it under your Medicare instead? I told her that would be fine, paid the difference, and drove home with that splinter working itself a little deeper. I didn't have a secondary card. I'd never had a secondary card in my life. That evening I called my nephew Robert, the one I'd sold the roofing company to, the closest thing I had to a son since my own boy, Danny, passed in a car accident 12 years back. Robert had gone through the books of Whitfield Roofing with me for 2 years before the sale closed, and he knew numbers better than any accountant I'd ever paid. Uncle Frank, what's going on? I'm not sure yet. I told him. Might be nothing. But I want you to come by Saturday and help me look through some paperwork. He came by that Saturday morning with 2 coffees and a legal pad, and we sat at my kitchen table for 4 hours going through 5 years of statements I pulled from a filing cabinet I hadn't opened since Diane's funeral. It was Robert who found it first, a checking account at Heritage Trust. I had no memory of opening, dated 14 months back, right around the time I'd had my hernia surgery and spent 3 weeks in a fog of pain medication and afternoon naps. Uncle Frank, Robert said slowly, turning the statement toward me. There's $41,000 that moved through this account in the last year. You know anything about this? I did not. We drove down to the Heritage Trust branch on Colfax the following Monday morning, and a young branch manager named Danielle Ruiz pulled up the account on her screen, her expression going careful the way people's expressions go careful when they realize they're about to be the one delivering bad news. Mr. Whitfield, this account was opened March 14th of last year. The application lists your name, your social security number, and a signature. She turned the monitor toward me. Can you confirm this is your signature? I looked at it a long moment. It had my loops, my slant, close enough to fool a bank teller glancing at it during a busy Tuesday. But I'd signed my name on job contracts and change orders and permit applications for 4 decades, and I knew my own hand the way I knew the sound of my own truck engine. That's not my signature, I said. Danielle's face didn't change much, but something behind her eyes did. I'm going to need you to file a fraud report. This is a serious matter, Mr. Whitfield, and I want to be straightforward with you given your age and the circumstances. This may also qualify as elder financial exploitation, which is a separate legal matter entirely from ordinary fraud. Robert sat beside me with his jaw set tight. I asked Danielle who had access to make withdrawals, and she pulled up the transaction history. Country club dues, a boat down payment, a trip to Cabo, and there, dated the second Saturday in June, a charge from Silvercrest Country Club for $6,200 the exact night of Tyler's graduation party. I sat very still in that little office with the framed photo of Danielle's kids on her desk and felt the floor tilt slightly under me. I need to ask you something, Mr. Whitfield, Danielle said, gentler now. Do you have any reason to believe a family member might have opened this account? My jaw ached from clenching it. I thought about the down payment on Kelly and Greg's house 11 years back, $62,000 I'd wired without blinking, because that's what you do for your daughter. I thought about the $28,000 for Greg's failed restaurant venture that nobody in the family ever mentioned again. I thought about 100 small kindnesses that had somehow, over the years, become invisible, absorbed into the family's understanding of how things simply were. Yes, I said. My voice came out low and rough. I believe I do. We spent the next 2 hours with a fraud specialist named Carlos Mendez, who walked Robert and me through the whole process, what documentation the bank would need, what a forgery investigation typically looked like, how long it might take, what my options were. Once the signature analysis came back, he was thorough and plain-spoken, and didn't try to soften anything for me, which I appreciated more than he probably knew. On the elevator down, Robert looked over at me. You doing okay? My throat was tight in that particular way it gets when you've been holding something in too long and your body starts trying to push it out whether you're ready or not. Not yet, I told him honestly. But I will be. He nodded and let it sit there without pushing, because that's the kind of man Robert is. He knows when to talk and when to just stand next to somebody. I drove home with both hands steady on the wheel and Carlos Mendez's card sitting on the passenger seat. My phone lit up twice on the drive Kelly. Then Greg and I let both calls ring through to voicemail. I turned the radio up instead and let George Strait fill the cab the rest of the way home, because some afternoons call for a voice that's seen its share of hard weather too. They showed up at my door on a Wednesday evening, and the bakery box was my first clue. In 39 years of marriage, Diane received exactly 2 surprise bakery boxes from our daughter, one after her hysterectomy, one after Kelly backed into our mailbox and wanted to soften the conversation before admitting it. Both times, the box arrived right before the hard thing. Kelly set this one on my counter with a smile that didn't sit right on her face and said she'd picked it up special. My favorite. Lemon bars from the place on Grant Street. I thanked her and thought, here it comes. Greg looked good, pressed polo, the kind of tan you get from a country club pool rather than actual outdoor work. He walked through my front hallway with his hands in his pockets, eyes moving slowly around the room, not admiring, assessing, the way a man's eyes move when he's estimating square footage and resale value. Kelly drifted toward the back of the house, her sandals quiet on the hardwood. "I always forget how much light you get back here, Dad," she called from the hallway, looking at the window frames rather than the light itself. "Sit down," I told Greg. "I'll put on coffee. Don't trouble yourself on our account." "I'm making it for me," I said. "You're welcome to some if you want it." I made the coffee slow, the way I always did, 4 minutes grind to pour. Greg sat at my kitchen table. Kelly drifted back in and settled across from him, and set a glossy trifold brochure on the table with the careful casualness of someone laying down a card they'd been holding since before they walked in the door. Whispering Pines Senior Living, Asheville, North Carolina. Full-color photos of smiling 70-somethings on a sunlit patio that looked nothing like any patio I'd ever actually seen occupied by real 70-somethings. A tagline across the top, "Live your next chapter fully. We've been thinking." Kelly began, in the voice she uses when she's about to ask for something unreasonable, wearing the costume of something obviously sensible. "This house is wonderful, Dad. It really is. But it's a lot for one person." Greg leaned forward, elbows on my table. "And the market's hot right now, Frank. Houses in this neighborhood are going in days. You could clear 400, easy. And this place," he gestured toward the brochure, "the buy-in's reasonable, and it takes the maintenance off your plate entirely." I let the coffee finish brewing before I answered. I poured 3 mugs, set 2 down in front of them, and sat with my own. "Funny," I said. "I don't remember mentioning I was having trouble with the maintenance." Kelly's smile faltered just slightly. "We just worry, Dad, especially after your surgery last year. We think it'd be good for you to be somewhere with support close by." "Support," I repeated. I turned the brochure over once, looked at the price printed in small type at the bottom of the back panel. $4,200 a month. This is a fair amount of concern for a man who got a plate of crackers at his own grandson's graduation because rich food wasn't good for his heart. The kitchen went quiet enough that I could hear the refrigerator hum. "That was for your health, Dad," Kelly said, but her voice had lost some of its footing. "Sure," I said. I set the brochure down. "I'll think about it." That seemed to satisfy them enough. They finished their coffee, made small talk about Ava's softball season, and left within the half hour. Greg's hand at the small of Kelly's back as he guided her out my front door like a man closing a deal he was fairly confident about. I sat back down at my kitchen table after they'd gone and looked at that brochure a long while. Then I picked up the phone and called Carlos Mendez. The investigation took 5 weeks. Carlos was patient and precise through every phone call, walking me through each development without ever making promises he couldn't keep. The forensic handwriting analysis came back on a Tuesday in late July. The signature on the Heritage Trust application was not mine, and the analyst's report noted specific inconsistencies in the letter formation that a trained eye could distinguish, even though it would fool a casual glance. The account had been opened using my social security number, my date of birth, and a copy of my driver's license, the same driver's license I recalled leaving on my kitchen counter for 2 full weeks the previous March, back when I'd asked Kelly to run some errands for me while I recovered from hernia surgery and could barely make it to the mailbox and back. Carlos also pulled the IP address used to set up online banking access for the account. It traced back to a residential address on Larkspur Court, Kelly and Greg's house. I sat with that piece of information for 3 full days before I did anything with it. I want to be honest and tell you those were 3 of the hardest days of my life, harder in some ways than the day we buried Danny, because at least that grief had no one's fingerprints on it but God's. This grief had a face I'd watched grow up, a face I'd walked down the aisle, a face that used to fall asleep on my shoulder during the drive home from her grandmother's house 40 years back, when she was small enough to fit in the crook of my arm. On the 4th day, Carlos called to tell me the bank had frozen the account and that criminal referral was now a live option, entirely my call to make. He also mentioned, gently, that I should think carefully about what outcome I actually wanted. Because the law doesn't leave much room for nuance once it gets rolling. And family, once it enters a courtroom, rarely comes back out looking the same. I thought about my grandson Tyler, 18 years old, about to start his first semester at State, a kid who had never done a single thing to deserve being caught in the middle of what his parents had built in the dark. I thought about Ava, 12 years old, still drawing on tablecloths. And I thought about a version of justice that didn't require a courtroom to still mean something. I called Kelly and asked her and Greg to come to dinner. I told her I'd pick the place, and I'd make the reservation, and I wanted the whole family there. Her, Greg, Tyler, Ava, And, for reasons I didn't explain, Doug and Pam as well. Where? Kelly asked. And there was something uncertain in her voice already, like she sensed the ground shifting beneath a conversation that hadn't fully started yet. Silvercrest, I said. The back room. Same table. There was a long pause on the line. Okay, Dad, she said finally. When? 2 weeks. I'll send the details. And I hung up, walked to my desk, and pulled out that manila folder I'd left untouched in the bottom drawer for 5 years. I spread the papers out across my kitchen table that night and started organizing them, not for a courtroom, not yet, but for a dinner table, because I had decided that whatever came next needed to happen with everyone looking each other in the eye, in the same room where it had started. Silvercrest looks exactly the same in late July as it does in June, same white linens, same low candlelight, same string quartet piped in through hidden speakers, softening the room just enough to make it feel like a place where difficult truths might land gently instead of like blows. I arrived 20 minutes early and asked for the back room with the tall windows. The hostess led me there without needing to ask twice. Apparently, a man doesn't forget the table where he was handed a plate of crackers. I sat at the head of the table, not the end nearest the door. The head. Robert arrived next, coat still on, and sat down at my right without a word, the way a man sits beside someone he's already decided to stand with, whatever comes. Doug and Pam arrived a few minutes later, cheerful and a little confused in the way of people who'd been told only that dinner was at 7 and Frank was buying. Then Kelly and Greg came in with Tyler and Ava, moving through the dining room with the careful, watchful pace of people who suspected they were walking into something but couldn't say what. Kelly's eyes went first to the head of the table, to me sitting in it, and something shifted across her face, a small private recalculation, quickly smoothed back over as she took her seat. The waiter came for orders. I ordered for the whole table without asking anybody's preference. Prime rib for Doug, scallops for Kelly, the filet for Greg, burgers for the kids. And when the waiter turned to me, I said, the salmon for me, and bring the whole table a breadbasket to start. Nobody said anything about that, though I noticed Kelly's chin lift slightly. She heard it. I'd meant her to. Dinner ran mostly ordinary for the first half hour. Doug told his fishing story again, the one where the fish had now grown to nearly 2 feet, and Pam corrected a detail about the river twice. Ava drew on her napkin with a crayon the hostess had given her. Tyler talked about his dorm assignment at State, and I watched him laugh with the particular ease of a young man who had no idea yet what this dinner was actually going to be. After the plates were cleared, and before dessert arrived, I set my hand flat on the table. The conversation stopped on its own, the way it does when a man who rarely raises his voice finally does something with his silence instead. I reached into my jacket and laid 3 pages on the white tablecloth, smoothed flat with the side of my hand. Doug, Pam, I said, I'd like to read something out loud, because you're part of this family too now, in your own way, and I think you deserve to hear a version of things that's complete. Doug's expression went careful. Pam set down her wine glass. March 14th of last year. I read, my voice steady. An account was opened at Heritage Trust in my name. I was 3 weeks out from hernia surgery and taking pain medication that left me foggy most afternoons. I did not open this account. I looked up. I did not sign this application. Kelly's face had already gone pale, the color of the tablecloth itself. Greg's hand, halfway to his water glass, stopped moving entirely. The signature on the application, I continued, was analyzed by a forensic examiner hired by Heritage Trust's fraud division. It is not mine. The IP address used to access the account online traces to a residence on Larkspur Court. I paused and let that sit in the room a moment. That's Kelly and Greg's house. The quartet, somewhere out in the main dining room, kept playing softly, absurdly, underneath the silence that had fallen over our table. $41,000 moved through that account in 14 months, I said. Country club dues, a boat down payment, a trip to Cabo San Lucas. I turned to the second page. And $6,200 charged the night of Tyler's graduation party. The same night I was handed a plate of crackers, because rich food, I was told, wasn't good for a man my age. Tyler's fork had gone completely still in his hand. He looked from his mother to his father and back, 18 years old, and watching the floor of his understanding of his own family shift in real time. Dad, Kelly started, her voice small. I can explain. You'll have your chance, I said, Not unkindly, but not stopping either. But I want to finish first, because Doug and Pam came here thinking this was an ordinary family dinner, and I think they should understand who they've been sitting across the table from all these years. I looked at Doug directly. Your son told people at that graduation party he'd earned every bit of Silvercrest's membership fee himself. Hardworking, self-made. I believe I heard the phrase built it all from nothing more than once that night. Doug's jaw tightened. Pam's hand slid across and covered his on the tablecloth. He had help, I said. $62,000 of it, 11 years ago, for the down payment on their house. $28,000 more for a restaurant that didn't survive its first year. That's not a weakness in a man. Needing help from family never has been. But lying about it, and then forging his father-in-law's signature to keep the lifestyle going after the help stopped coming freely, that's a different thing, entirely. Greg's face had gone rigid, a muscle working in his jaw. Frank, I think you're jumping to, the bank's fraud division doesn't jump, I said. They investigate, and they've referred this file for criminal review. I let that land, watching it move across Greg's face like weather. I haven't decided yet whether to let that referral go forward. Kelly. My daughter had tears standing in her eyes now. Not falling yet. Just gathered there. Threatening. Dad, please, Tyler doesn't need to hear all this at his own. Tyler is 18, I said, and my voice, for the first time all evening, carried something sharper underneath it. He's old enough to understand that the people who raised him lied to him about where his private school tuition came from, and about where the money for his father's boat came from, and about who really paid for the very party where I was handed a plate of crackers because I supposedly couldn't handle rich food. I looked at my grandson. None of this is your fault, Ty. Not one bit of it. I need you to hear that clearly. Tyler's eyes were wet, but he nodded, holding my gaze steady the way his mother used to when she was young enough to still look at me like I had all the answers in the world. I folded the pages and set them back inside my jacket. I'm not here to put anyone in handcuffs tonight, I said. The fraud report is already filed. That part's done, and it's out of my hands now regardless of what happens at this table. But what happens after tonight is still a choice, and I want to lay it out plainly. I looked at Kelly, then at Greg. You sit down with Carlos Mendez's office this week. You sign whatever restitution agreement the bank requires. You remove Greg's name from anything tied to my accounts or my estate that he was never supposed to have access to in the first place. And you stop telling people at country clubs that you built your life without anyone's help, because you didn't. And everyone in this room now knows it. Greg's throat worked. When he finally spoke, his voice came out thinner than I'd ever heard it. Frank, he stopped. Started again. I know what this looks like. I know exactly what it is, I said. I'd like you to know it too. Nobody said much after that. Doug paid the check without being asked, which struck me as the first honestly generous thing I'd seen him do all evening. I helped Ava into her jacket, told her I loved her, and watched the family walk out of Silvercrest in a formation that looked nothing like the one that had walked in. Robert walked out to the parking lot with me. Behind us, footsteps came fast across the pavement, faster than they should for a warm July evening. Greg, jacket open, breathing hard, catching up to where I stood by my truck. I can't stand up to her, he said, and his voice cracked wide open on the last word. I want you to know, I see it. I've always seen it. The way she talks, the way I go along with it. And what you did in there tonight. His voice broke apart completely. He pressed the back of his hand against his mouth and didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I put my hand on my son-in-law's shoulder and left it there a moment. Then I got in my truck and drove home. The Millbrook Diner has booths the color of old mustard, and a cook named Ray who's been flipping the same recipe of pancakes since sometime in the Reagan administration. I started bringing Tyler there the Sunday after that dinner at Silvercrest, and we've kept it up every week since. Same booth, back corner, window seat that Tyler always claims first because he likes watching the street. Loretta, who's worked that diner longer than Tyler's been alive and calls every customer hon, regardless of age, brought us 2 menus we didn't need. The usual, hun? She asked Tyler. He nodded like he was confirming a business contract. Belgian waffle, extra strawberries. And for you, Frank? Coffee and eggs, I said. Same as always. While we waited, Tyler told me about his dorm roommate, a kid from Cleveland, who apparently snored like a diesel engine. He told me about the engineering intro course he was dreading and looking forward to in equal measure. I laughed when he laughed, asked the questions that mattered to him, and was present in the particular way you can only be present when nothing underneath the table needs tending to anymore. The waffle came. Tyler went at it immediately, the way 18-year-olds eat when they're not performing for anybody. I cut into my eggs and thought about the 6 weeks that had passed since that dinner at Silvercrest. Greg had shown up at Carlos Mendez's office the following Tuesday, sat through the whole meeting mostly silent, and signed the restitution agreement without argument. The disputed account was closed, the funds being repaid on a schedule Carlos had helped structure so it wouldn't bankrupt them outright. I'd asked for that much, at least, for Ava's sake, for Tyler's. My estate documents had been quietly revised. Greg's name came off everything it never should have been on. Kelly had called me twice a week since, mostly just to talk, her voice smaller than I remembered it, and I'd started letting myself believe, cautiously, that something honest might be rebuilding itself underneath all of it. I'd repainted my own front porch the week before, a deep evergreen Diane always said she wanted and I never got around to. 39 years. I figured it was time. "Grandpa," Tyler said, looking up with a strawberry stuck to his lip, "can we keep doing this every Sunday? Even after I'm at school?" "Every Sunday I'm able to," I told him. "You just tell me what time works with your classes." His face broke into a grin that had belonged to him since he was 2 years old. "Promise?" "Promise." He went back to his waffle, satisfied. And outside the window, Millbrook Avenue did its quiet Sunday things, a woman walking 2 dogs, a man washing his car in his driveway across the street, summer sitting easy over the whole town. I thought about Diane, and how she would have ordered the same waffle Tyler had, and made him tell her every detail of his roommate's snoring, and remembered every word of it a week later. I thought about Greg in that parking lot, his voice breaking open, a man finally seeing the shape of what he'd built and understanding it had been built on a foundation that wasn't his. I thought about the 41 years I'd spent on rooftops and job sites, building things that would stand long after anyone remembered my name was the one who'd raised the walls. That had always been fine by me. I built for the thing itself, never for the credit. The check came to $19 and change. I left a 25 and told Loretta to keep it. She tucked it into her apron with the easy efficiency of a woman who'd been collecting thank yous her whole working life. Tyler slid out of the booth and zipped his jacket halfway before I reached over and finished it for him out of old habit. Even though he hadn't needed help with a zipper in a decade, he let me do it anyway. "Come on, Grandpa," he said. "I want to see if Coach is running drills at the field before I head back to campus." We walked out together into the warm morning, 4 blocks between us, and where I'd parked, his hand finding mine without either of us quite reaching for it first. My phone buzzed once in my jacket pocket. Kelly. I'd been half expecting the call all week, not sure yet what it would carry when it finally came an apology, a question, or just the sound of her voice checking whether the line between us was still open. Tyler pulled my hand toward the corner, laughing about something already, moving on to the next thing the way young men do. I left the phone in my pocket and let it wait in the quiet dark there a while longer. Kelly could have 10 minutes later this afternoon. This walk, this grandson, this particular warm Sunday, those couldn't wait at all. I'm not a man who talks much about faith, but I believe this. What gets buried in the dark eventually finds its way into the light, whether you go looking for it or not. I didn't have to force anything. I just had to stop looking away from what was right in front of me the whole time. If there's a lesson in any of this, it's a simple one. Justice inside a family doesn't usually arrive loud. Sometimes it looks like a signed restitution agreement, a seat at the head of a table, and a grandson who orders his waffle without needing to ask anybody's permission first. I waited too long to say anything. I mistook keeping the peace for keeping my dignity, and those two things are not the same, no matter how similar they can look from the inside of a family dinner. If any part of this story sounds familiar to you, I hope you won't wait as long as I did. The people who love you only for what you can hand them will drop you the second the wait gets inconvenient. The ones who love you for who you actually are will still be sitting across the table when you finally decide to set that weight down for good. That's what it looks like at 68, a plate of crackers turning into the moment I finally read the fine print on my own family. If this story found you somewhere real tonight, tell me down in the comments, have you ever been the one who quietly covered everything and never got so much as a thank you for it? Share it with somebody who needs to hear they're allowed to stop staying quiet. And if you haven't yet, go ahead and subscribe. There's another story waiting for you soon. Thank you for staying with me all the way to the end tonight. It means more than you'd guess. Some names and details in this story were changed for the sake of the people in it, but the heart of it is true, and I hope some part of it finds its way to exactly who needs it.